Okay, so let me take you back to the 19th century. Imagine a lush island, Java. Green hills, rice fields, volcanoes in the distance. It's paradise. At least, that's what it looked like on the postcards sent home to Amsterdam. But underneath the surface, a brutal colonial system with corrupt officials that exploited and oppressed the inhabitants of the Dutch East Indies, or as we now know it, Indonesia. All the way on the other side of the planet in the Netherlands, only a small amount of people was against this exploitation. Most people thought the oppression was justified, or didn't know about the cruelties that Javanese people had to endure. And one Dutch civil servant, frustrated, angry, and unemployed, decided that it was enough. He decided to expose it all and fight it, not with an army or a rebellion, but with a novel. That man was Multatuli, a pseudonym that's Latin for I have suffered much, and his book, the Max Havelaar, helped ignite a firestorm of criticism against Dutch colonialism. It's been called the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the East Indies, and in this video, we'll explore how one revolutionary novel shook the foundation of a colonial empire, and gave a voice to the voiceless. In the mid-1800s, the Dutch ran a system in their colony known as the cultivation system, or het cultuurstelsel in Dutch. It sounds harmless enough, but here's how it worked. The Javanese population was forced to grow export crops, like coffee, sugar, and indigo, on a portion of their land. These crops were then sold to the Dutch state for fixed prices, often below market value. The farmers got almost nothing, while they had to work their asses off for their foreign oppressors. And if you didn't own any land, you were required to work, unpaid for up to 66 days a year on government plantations. That's more than 2 months of free labor, on top of taxes, on top of rent, on top of everything else. It was slavery in all but name. And the profits, they were enormous. Dutch government coffers swelled, Amsterdam prospered, and back in the Netherlands, most people never even saw what it cost. Until the Max Havelaar hit the shelves. Multatuli wasn't his real name. He was born as Eduard Douwes Dekker, a Dutch civil servant stationed in the former Dutch East Indies. In 1855, he became assistant resident of Lebak, a remote region in Java. There, he witnessed firsthand the corruption of his fellow officials and colleagues, and he saw the cruelty that befell the Javanese. Local chiefs were skimming money, villagers were being overworked, families were starving, and Eduard, well, he was supposed to look away from it all. However, he tried to report it. He filed multiple complaints, but his superiors just shrugged and wiped them off the table. They profited from the oppression as well, after all, because they all got a percentage of the profits. And Eduard had to just sit there and take it all. So he did something radical. He quit. He sailed home to the Netherlands and, in a frenzy of anger and purpose, he wrote a book. It would take him only 1 month to finish, but it would explode like a bomb in Dutch society. The Max Havelaar isn't just a novel. It's a literary Molotov cocktail, excellently crafted to expose the oppression in the former Dutch East Indies. And he had a clear target to aim it at, the Dutch government. The novel begins in Amsterdam from the perspective of a pompous coffee trader named Batavus Droogstoppel. He's rich and arrogant, boring and obsessed with business. He gets his hands on a mysterious manuscript about Java from a man called Sjaalman, and hands it off to his young assistant, Stern. The manuscript is a mess, but it is Stern's job to rewrite it so that it can be published. That's when things get interesting. Stern begins to tell the story of a man called Max Havelaar, an idealistic colonial official in Java who tries to stop local abuses and protect the native population. But he quickly finds himself crushed by bureaucracy, corruption, and indifference. The novel shifts tones constantly, from satire to tragedy to political manifesto. This is also because of all the different voices that tell the story. Then it's the annoying Droogstoppel, then it's Stern, and at the end it's Multatuli himself. We'll get to that later. The way that it's told makes the reader see the ignorance of Droogstoppel, and it really makes you hate him, while the reader starts admiring the courageous and good-hearted Max Havelaar even more. This is one way Multatuli gets you on the side of Max and his cause to end oppression. Another way is how Multatuli writes about women in the book. When there are scenes with women, they almost always outsmart the men, or are at the very least portrayed in a way that they are equal to the men. Back then, this wasn't the common train of thought, so by doing this, Multatuli also opens up the brains of the readers for more ideas of equality. Because if women can be equal to men, why can't the Javanese workers be equal to the Dutch or the officials with power? The novel is filled with little ways like these to make the reader sympathize with Max and the Javanese. One of the most famous examples is a heartbreaking chapter near the end of the book, the story of Saidja and Adinda, two young Javanese lovers. Saidja's father constantly loses his buffalo to the Dutch tax system, so the family has to move to stay alive. Before Saidja and Adinda part, they promise each other to wait for one another. But this dream ends in a nightmare. Saidja comes back only to find the village destroyed because of war, and Adinda, the love of his life, has been maimed and killed. Filled with despair, he commits suicide. Multatuli explicitly states that this story is fiction, that he doesn't know about the Saidja and Adinda in particular. But it makes it all the more gut-wrenching when he says that, instead, there are dozens of Saidjas and Adindas, whose lives are all destroyed because of the oppression. It was the first time in Dutch literary history that the inner world of a native was explored like this, and it was all designed to make you feel something. Not about Dutch profits, but about the people who suffered to make them. At the end of the book, in the very final chapter, Multatuli drops all the fiction and pushes his characters like Droogstoppel, Stern and Max Havelaar out of the way to take the stage himself. He even tells Droogstoppel to choke on his coffee. He turns directly to the reader and to the King of the Netherlands, and he demands justice. He explicitly calls his own country a robber state by the sea, and he ends the novel with a question to the king. Is it your imperial will that there are more than 30 million subjects in the Dutch East Indies who are being robbed and exploited in your name? No one had ever dared to say this, and certainly not in print. When Max Havelaar was published in 1860, it was scandalous. Some praised it as a work of genius, others dismissed it as dangerous propaganda, and the Dutch government definitely wasn't thrilled. To be completely fair, the book did not end oppression. Multatuli never got the reforms he wanted. He never returned to the colonies. But his book changed the conversation. It made the colonial system visible, tangible, human. It helped lay the groundwork for the eventual abolition of the cultivation system and the so-called ethical policy, a new approach that, at least in theory, focused on education and welfare for Indonesians. During the fight for their independence directly after the Second World War, Multatuli was seen as a revolutionary mind who had dared to criticize the colonial system where no one had dared before. Max Havelaar became required reading. It's taught in schools to this day, and its impact didn't stop with literature. In 1988, over a century later, the world's first fair trade organization was launched. Its name, Max Havelaar. It was a deliberate tribute, a reminder that exploitation hides in our daily lives, in our coffee, our sugar, our chocolate, that we can choose differently. Today, the fair trade movement spans the globe, and it all traces back in part to a Dutch civil servant who dared to say, "This is wrong, and I won't be silent." In a time when most people didn't care, he cared. He risked everything to show the Dutch public what their empire was really built on. And 160 years later, that message still echoes. Books can be weapons. Words can change the world, and sometimes a novel can end oppression.